Good evening, Secretary Sir. I am Shekhar. Thank
Good
you for
evening,
joining.
sir. Good evening to you and your team.
Thank you so much.
And congratulations and compliments for this wonderful initiative.
Thank you.
A very good evening, everyone. So, we are drawing the curtains now for the 2-day long event, National Conference on Monitoring and Evaluation and Learning. So, this is the penultimate session for the second edition of National Conference. In all, we had 9 sessions in this conference spread across 2 days that touched upon various issues concerning monitoring and evaluation. The response to this conference has been outstanding, judging by the number of participants on an average over 400 in each of the sessions participated from diverse background like academia, monitoring and evaluation practitioners, and various stakeholders in the M&E ecosystem. So the plan for this session is I will be introducing the keynote speaker and other panelists, and following which there will be a overall rapporteuring summary of all the 9 sessions that has preceded this session, which will be followed by keynote address by Secretary DFPD sir, and which will be followed by a vote of thanks by DG DMEO Dr. Shekhar Bonu sir. So I will now introduce each of the panelists, starting with our keynote speaker. Our keynote speaker for this closing ceremony is Mr. Sudhanshu Pandey, Secretary, Department of Food and Public Distribution, Government of India. Mr. Sudhanshu Pandey joined Indian Administrative Service of Government of India in the year 1987 and has experience of 33 years in different senior policy positions in state government, Government of India and Indian Embassy Germany. Currently serving as Secretary, Department of Food and Public Distribution since April 2020. As Additional Secretary in the Department of Commerce, he was responsible for India's trade policy, India's negotiation in WTO, and he was also responsible for GATS, SPSS, TBT, TRIMS, ASCM, and other multilateral agreements. He was also a chief negotiator for India and was responsible for various multilateral, unilateral, bilateral trade negotiation at highest level globally. In earlier assignments in state government, he has served as Principal Secretary Finance, Principal Secretary Energy, and Secretary Industry and Commerce, Managing Director SIDCO. In his present capacity, he deals with matters relating to food grains management in the country for the central pool stocks, including procurement, storage, and movement of wheat, rice, and coarse grains for its distribution through network of public distribution system outlets. He also deals with policy intervention for the sugar and edible oil industry in the country, and administration of National Food Security Act NFSA 2013 is one of his major responsibilities. So we extend you a very warm welcome, sir, for taking your time off from your busy schedule. Thank you for coming, sir. Now I introduce Dr. Shekhar Bonu, sir, Director General DMEO. Dr. Shekhar Bonu joined as Director General of Development Monitoring Evaluation Office in April 2019. Before joining Niti Aayog, Dr. Bonu worked with Asian Development Bank in Manila for 15 years. At ADB, he worked in health, urban infrastructure development, and regional cooperation, mainly in South Asia. Dr. Bonu worked in the Indian Administrative Service and served as a civil servant in Rajasthan between 1987 to 2003. Among others, as District Magistrate, Director of Primary and Secondary Education, Chief Executive Officer of State-Owned Enterprises. Dr. Shekhar Bonu has a PhD from Johns Hopkins University and is a Chartered Financial Analyst charter holder. He has a wide range of research and operational interest, and has published in many peer-reviewed journals. Thank you, sir, for joining. Now, I take this opportunity to introduce Mr. Shailendra Dwivedi, sir, Joint Secretary, DMEO, Niti Aayog. Mr. Shailendra has a rich experience as a policy maker as well as working with large teams in implementation of change during his career as a civil servant. Financial and social inclusion, quality assurance, and transparency in governance, global logistic and supply chain management. Sustainable development have been at the core of his work experience. He has a rich human resource development and capacity building experience both in India and abroad, having worked at the National Postal Academy, Ghaziabad, and Asia Pacific Postal Union, Bangkok for 7 years. He was involved in design of the Indian postal banks and framework for development of exports from India through postal channel in coordination with ministries and stakeholders. He has represented India at Universal Postal Union, a specialized UN agency, and other global bodies, and has valuable experience in international relations and negotiations. He practices holistic approach to solving wicked problems with interdisciplinary and design thinking. He has a deep interest in organizational system and behavior. He belongs to 1997 batch of Indian Postal Service. Thank you, sir, for joining. And now I introduce our third panelist, Mr. Anthony Syriac. Mr. Anthony joined the Government of India in 1996 as a member of Indian Economic Service. As part of the program evaluation organization of the erstwhile Planning Commission, he was involved in the evaluation of many government schemes from 1997 to 2007. He worked on areas such as industry, infrastructure, public finance, and macroeconomics during his stints in Ministry of Finance. He was involved in managing India's development partnership with Africa when he was in Ministry of External Affairs. Before joining DMEO in December 2020, Sri Anthony was also an economic advisor to the 15th Finance Commission of Government of India from 2018 to 2020. So I extend you a warm welcome to the esteemed panelists. And now we will move to the sessions. Next slide, please. The themes that we covered during the 2-day long national conference. So the overall theme of this conference was monitoring and evaluation for sustainable development through cooperative federalism. And the sub-themes that we covered during these 2 days in the 9 sessions were building institutions and resource capabilities for monitoring and evaluation at the sub-national level, making evaluation inclusive and sensitive to the marginalized, vulnerable population, building future-ready systems through M&E, conceptualizing evaluation policy, data governance technology, and innovation for monitoring and evaluation, and finally, developing resilient M&E approaches. So these 2 days covering these broad 6 sub-themes under the main theme of sustainable development through cooperative federalism has been intellectually stimulating, and from these sessions there are some issues that were brought to the fore where the systemic and structural and functional issues involved in the monitoring and evaluation ecosystem and various possible solutions were also discussed. Very briefly, the takeaways from this conference was the data quality and the data availability has to be seamless for a proper and incisive monitoring and evaluation ecosystem. That is a clear takeaway. Bringing inclusiveness into the monitoring and evaluation system is another area which is a futuristic area which has to be looked into and has to be factored into in every monitoring and evaluation system. Developing M&E capacities at national and sub-national level cannot be stressed more. It is very important to develop capacities, and having partners to develop them is the way forward. And developing M&E system is an evolutionary and adaptive one, has to be to meet the uncertain challenges that we face in the present times, like COVID and other exigencies, and finally making evaluations and monitoring honest and citizen-centric is the way forward. these learnings and others that will be discussed in details by the overall rapporteuring presentation to be done by Anthony sir and Shailendra sir. So I would now request Shailendra sir to conduct the further rapporteuring of the session. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Avinash. Shri Sudhanshu Pandey, Secretary, Department of Food and Public Distribution, Dr. Shekhar Bonu, Director General DMEO, Dr. Avinash Das, our anchor for this closing session, Mr. Anthony, my partner rapporteur, Team DMEO, all stakeholders of the M&E ecosystem, and dear participants to this closing ceremony. It is my privilege to bring to you the summary of the discussions of day 1 of the second National Conference on Monitoring, Evaluation and Learning held yesterday and today, that is 16-17th March 2022, on the theme of Monitoring and Evaluation for Sustainable Development through Cooperative Federalism. Day 1 was focused upon the monitoring aspects of this theme. The conference started with the keynote address from Honorable Vice Chairman Niti Aayog, Dr. Rajiv Kumar. Our Vice Chairman underlined the importance of evidence-based policy making, the work done by the DMEO in the last 3 years especially, highlighting output-outcome monitoring framework, the efforts to bring output-outcome monitoring framework to states and local governments, work done in states like J&K and others, the data governance quality index and the reports that have been prepared for and shared with different ministries to bring about the quality consciousness in the central government. The evaluations that we are undertaking as a part of the mandate from the highest level, the new methods around the use of administrative data, use of new technologies, focus on subnational capacities and systems, urgent need for creating monitoring evaluation capacity at all levels is something that he underlined as the future course of action for DMEO. He underlined the importance of the M&E ecosystem around institutions, people, practices, collaboration, creativity, and convergence or coherence. He also mentioned that the focus needs to be on developing subnational capacities and systems for creating M&E capacity at all levels. It is pertinent to mention that most of the terms highlighted by the Honorable Vice Chairman during the inaugural session were heard over and over again during the conference, making them the key focal points for DMEO and all stakeholders in the year ahead from now, till we meet again for the next year's conference. If we look at it, the whole theme of the conference around cooperative federalism has this focus as underlined by the Honorable Vice Chairman. The keynote address was followed by the release of a compendium of essays titled Monitoring and Evaluation at 70, marking the 70 years of evaluation particularly since the founding of the PEO in 1952. Strengthening India's evidence systems for accelerated reforms and inclusive growth. That's the title of this compendium, which has been possible because of the contributions from all our partners and authors within DMEO, as you can see in the list on the screen here. For paucity of time, I am not taking the names, but you can actually access this compendium from our website. A special thanks to the editorial team led by Urvashi and Ashish, along with CB, Meenal, Veenu, and Nandu from IMK and our partners. Pardon me for using their names informally for paucity of time. This compendium, we hope, will actually help a lot in the time ahead to keep our dialogues focused on the themes that are very relevant and captured in the volume that we have been able to bring about. The plan for the sessions on day 1, what you see on the screen right now, covering the 5 sessions, is actually woven into an integral theme, which was, I think, carefully decided by our Director General in consultation with other stakeholders. And we have, right from the beginning, focused on the core objective of maximizing public expenditure efficiency and accountability and fostering cooperative federalism. And that's been the theme throughout this conference over the 2 days, and especially on the first day, which I am talking about just now. The inaugural session was followed by a deeper dive into different aspects of monitoring, the different building blocks, starting with discussion around frameworks in the first session on localization of outcomes monitoring. And while the frameworks would only work around availability of data, therefore the next session actually talked about availability of data for making these frameworks effective and for these frameworks to be more useful. While the first part of the data dialogue was around the present with whatever is possible in the existing scenario, if there were better data policies, better data standards, and a spirit of sharing of data. The second session on the theme of data and technology was looking at possibilities with emerging technologies, apart from the challenges that might be there in adopting these new technologies for monitoring and maybe monitoring and evaluation. The final session was about the citizen-centric approach to monitoring and evaluation, which was in a way a theme that we heard right from the inaugural session, from the opening speeches from Mrs. Mini Mahajan, who actually opened the discussion in the inaugural session. So looking at the inaugural session, which was actually a very power-packed session, and it actually energized, I think, all of us who had the good luck to be a part of it. Those who have missed that session should definitely look at it on our YouTube channel. And this session is actually covering the different layers of how monitoring can be improved at all levels in our country. So while Mrs. Mini Mahajan, Secretary, Ministry of Jal Shakti, shared some hands-on use cases from the Jal Jeevan Mission and Swachh Bharat Gramin Mission to bring out the efforts made to strengthen monitoring, people's participation and use of technologies in strengthening the implementation and ensuring outcomes from the mission, she stressed the need for a strong center-state 50-50 partnership in the whole process. She underlined that single monolithic monitoring and evaluation structures are not suitable, and the center needs to drive, motivate, guide, and build capacities in the state for sustainable outcomes through effective monitoring. The importance of feedback loops was underlined, and that's something that we have heard throughout the 2 days. She stressed that the center-state partnership needs to be built from the planning stage itself to have the advantage of a co-creation in the assets and infrastructure to improve the quality of life of the citizens in the country. She also mentioned that coherence in the monitoring mechanisms on the ground for the social sector is a challenge and opportunity for the government. She advised that DMEO should work closely with implementing agencies and citizens to strengthen monitoring. The Chief Economic Advisor, Mr. Anant Nageshwaran, raised important issues that were need for making the right public expenditure choices. He raised a fundamental question around whether monitoring and evaluation should be looked at together or separately. He stressed, while elaborating further, that the evaluation is a much more nuanced and complex and cannot be replaced by monitoring. At the same time, the data availability needs to improve for both monitoring and evaluation, as currently there was a big time lag in availability of data for critical decisions. He also highlighted the existing and potential quality gaps in research data, administrative data, and service data. He underlined that development is complex and monitoring and evaluation needs to deal with this in the most balanced way, with a creative combination of methods to solve the problems faced. In his concluding remarks, he stressed that evaluation should start with the objective of finding out what could have gone right and what are the things that do not work specifically. Mr. Adil Janul Bhai, in a highly inspiring address, stressed the need to democratize and demystify evaluation to make it accessible to the ground level worker. A series of courses through different platforms, including iGot, as part of a Mission Karmyogi, is what he suggested as a definite need of the hour. He stressed on the need to use technology and to make it simple to use data and data analytics at all levels, so that those complex equations are not necessary for the user to know. Simple collection of data should lead to the analytics with the use of new technology, is what he was suggesting. He stressed that the need was to introduce not just citizen-centric governance, but also governance-centric evaluation. And that is a very big challenge that he has thrown for the monitoring and evaluation community. Mr. Emmanuel Jimenez raised questions about the bar for data quality as to how high that should be. On capacity building, he mentioned that there was a need to build capacity to use evaluation as well, and also demand for evaluation, so that there is an awareness about how evaluation can be used for improving governance. In response to a question later, he also addressed the need to identify the message very clearly and for what purpose that message was being delivered. And a very interesting point made through the discussions was the key is to make the inconvenient truth palatable. And that is something that perhaps is also a big challenge. The way negative perceptions are associated with any negative evaluation result. While this session was very well received, it provided many pointers to DMEO and its partners for action in the coming days. This was followed by the subsequent sessions which built on the theme and the foundation that was set by the opening session. So in the beginning, we talked about localization of outcome monitoring. And the panelists, as you can see on the screen, were a diverse set of people, which was a theme in each of the panels. We tried to get different perspectives from all the different layers and look at the whole of country approach in all of our discussions. So in terms of the outcomes from the session, we focused on the frameworks that can be applied as coming out from the experience of the Smart Cities mission, and also contrasted or compared with the aspirational districts program. So the objectives being same or similar, the level of development being different in these different geographies. It was very interesting to see how there could be common parameters or different parameters that need to be adopted for monitoring in different geographies within the country. Between the aspirational districts program and the Smart Cities mission, this was a very important dialogue. Before this discussion, the UNDP brought about its experience of working in India in different states like Punjab, Odisha, Uttarakhand, and their experience of how sustainable development goal focused outcome monitoring could actually guide better budget allocations and outcomes for the larger benefit of the citizens in the country. So while we had all the top level speakers from the center, we also had the representative from Uttarakhand who actually brought about a first-hand view of how outcome monitoring was being introduced in the block and panchayat levels in the state of Uttarakhand. Each of these blocks and each of these lessons were very important, and we have really taken note of that to see how we can build an India stack possibly going forward, which rises from the village and the block up to the center level, giving due analytics at each and every level for the decision making that is required to bring about real evidence-based policy making, as is the objective. So looks like there is some problem with the slides. We cannot change it, is it?
Unshare. You continue.
So next session was on the theme of data and sharing of data, creating robust data systems and processes to enable data use for decentralized decision making. This was in a way a continuation of the previous discussion on frameworks. And the panelists, as you can see on the screen, were again representative of not just different experiences and geographies, but also different generations. We had a very senior retired civil servant, and we had youngsters from the Smart Cities Mission and eGov Foundation, as well as from Aspirational Districts Program, talking about what was covered in the earlier session, with some more focused objective on availability of data for monitoring the outcomes. So the important points that were covered in this session was profiling, prioritization, programs, and progress. All of these with the careful use of data. It was pointed out that data needs to be available as a common resource. Data is there, but data is not used. The absence of the feedback loop was again stressed here. In the Aspirational Districts Program, the approach taken to build capacities at the district level through a center-driven initiative was captured. Data collected over 6 thematic areas, and the way the capacity was created was also discussed. It was also explained how in the Aspirational Districts Program, the capacity to collect data at the block and panchayat level was also being created by creating a replica of what was created at the central level within the district itself. So this is just a journey that has started, but it is there as a possibility for seamless data flows. But of course, as was pointed out by other panelists, it would be necessary to make data collection less cumbersome in this whole process, and it would be necessary to have the possibilities to scale up these islands of excellence that has been created within the Smart Cities program and other such areas. So that was the key takeaway from this session on creating robust data systems and process to enable data use for decentralized decision making. These were some highlights from the session. Data is the new oil we are often hearing, and this was something that was shared, but I think it was also shared with the feeling that just like oil, it is the privilege of some people rather than universally available. So that's the objective what the next session was trying to bring in, how data could become actually universally available. And under the theme of role of data, technology, and innovation for more inclusive monitoring and evaluation practices, we had a representative panel which gave a global view. It gave a state-level view from Mr. Santosh Mishra. It also gave an academician's very rich deep dive into the possibilities that are emerging in this area, as well as from the reality point of view from NIC, NICSI, we got a sense of how these systems could actually be adopted gradually or maybe even suddenly in the government, provided the right frameworks were there. So this session was actually very interesting in the sense that the speakers were not universally optimistic about the possible use of these new technologies and data right away. There was a lot of doubt whether these emerging and new technologies could kind of blend well with the rigors of evaluation, and whether the technology used for technology's sake would actually give us the accurate information for the decisions that we need to make. There were suggestions on how these problems could be solved from especially our global speaker there, who underlined the importance of keeping intact the rigors of the evaluation process even as we move to the use of technology. by means of asking the right questions, having a very diversified team so that we could have all perspectives covered, and at the same time making sure inclusivity is not an issue, and that we don't just have a data from a certain segment and we generalize it for the use of the whole of the demographic universe. So these were very important points, and the ambition at the close of this session, which the moderator pointed out, was that rather than data being oil, data should be like the new sun, so that it is accessible and usable for everyone. So, but yeah, it is sun, but just like for solar energy to be converted into electricity, there are some efforts required here in terms of technology and innovation for the sun in data to become useful for monitoring and evaluation. So that's a task that this session very clearly opened up for us. So after this, we moved towards the people aspect of evaluation in the last session, which was led by our partner Graham. And this session titled Taking a Participatory and Citizen-Centric Approach to Monitoring and Evaluation actually touched the core theme that was underlined right from the very beginning, from the very first session, when Secretary Ministry of Jal Shakti mentioned that. It was also mentioned by Mr. Adil Jainul Bhai. And here in this last session, we had some evidences, some examples of how participatory and citizen-led evaluations and monitoring were practiced in different parts of the country, especially from states like Karnataka, Jharkhand. We had good examples that were discussed, and a very clear role of the participatory approach came about in that session. The softer elements, it was understood, apart from the basic capacity building and the systems and the objectives that we undertake, would be very important. So the moderator concluded the session by mentioning respect, recognition, and reward. These were the 3 R's that were critical for making it more acceptable and making it more reachable. And he also mentioned the need for PPP, which is not just public-private partnerships, but pro-people, participatory, and plural approach to enabling community-led monitoring and evaluation. So we had some very good discussions there, conversations that probably need to continue even after this conference, and a lot of action points here for DMEO. And I think that's going to keep us all very busy, along with our partners and other stakeholders, to maybe make some progress and come about by the next year with some next level conversation on what needs to be done in the next financial year 23-24. Right now, of course, we have enough on our plate for the next 12 months on the monitoring side. On the evaluation side, I think I can hand it over to Anthony, sir, right? So for day 2 and for a peek into evaluation for sustainable development, over to Anthony Syria.
Thank you for this opportunity. And as the slide shows, there were 4 sessions, dedicated sessions on evaluation. Session 6 and session 9 were sessions on capacitation, states and the national level capacitation. Sandwiched between these 2 sessions, we took up 2 important burning issues. Session 7 on equity and session 8 on food and livelihoods. So let's So the first session was on capacitating states, and we had representatives from DMEO, the state governments, and the BNGF, to give the partners perspective. Next one. So the session provided an overview of evolution of evaluation at state level, its current status, best practices, and opportunities for collaboration between states, center, and partners. Next one, please. Now, the key takeaways. Two status points in the beginning. Policy response to evaluation has improved visibly at the center and the states. So this is guarded optimism on this. Still, serious constraints in manpower, technical capacity, ownership of evaluation still prevalent. Hence, going forward is tough. And what is the going forward? The following points came out in going forward. Capacity building is required for enhancing data use in decision making at all levels. So data use should become a behavioral practice. Then enhance participation of community, academic institutions, and NGOs in evaluation. So the point is government should look out. And the third point is need for evaluation policy at the center and states, and policies should talk to each other. So this is more aspirational. Effective communication will crucially determine impact of evaluation. So this point came out very clearly. Communication makes the difference. You would do many things, but finally, if the conclusions and recommendations are communicated well, the evaluation itself might fail. Keep generating quality evaluation studies will catalyze. So, I mean, institutionalization process will go on, but keep generating good studies, and finally, the demand for evaluation will improve. Prudent and selective outsourcing and partnerships are inevitable. This point can be elaborated, but I think it's self-evident. Given the capacities at the union and the state governments, and given the formidable requirements for evaluation, there is no escaping the fact that outsourcing has to be done, but prudently and selectively, because the baton has to be with the evaluators, and outsourcing is prudent and selective. Next one, please. So the second session was on inclusivity, especially for children, adolescents, and women. So this had distinguished panelists from multilaterals and evaluation organizations. Next one, please. So the focus of this session. The sessions try to stress the need for making evaluation more inclusive, as is clear from the topic. Focus on achieving outcomes for children, adolescents, and women. And the sessions try to present examples of successful designs that focus on inclusive outcomes. And the last one, highlight how participatory approach to evaluations can be leveraged to achieve the above purpose. Next one, please. So the takeaways. Inclusive evaluations empower individuals as owners of development. So this particular point is that inclusive evaluations are a purpose in themselves. However, weakest voices are often neglected in evaluation. This is an encapsulated lesson from the current set of evaluations. Weakest voices are not fully accounted for in evaluations. Then what should we do? Inclusiveness should become a normative construct guiding all evaluation studies. This becomes a primary requirement. Then go ahead. Evaluation should define outcomes that matter for inclusiveness. Then inclusive evaluations can be developed with active involvement of lower levels of governance, because sitting in Delhi, I can't I can't see what inclusive outcomes are. Go to the field, understand what inclusion means, get back to the center and conceptualize evaluation. And finally, a specific point, tools such as social equity assessment tool can be leveraged by evaluators. Next one, please. The third session was on sustainable food systems and resilient livelihoods. Here we had all distinguished experts on the panel, and this was anchored by WFP. And next one, please. So food systems are, balancing multiple trade-offs. One, increasing agricultural production. Second, dietary diversity and nutrition, including ensuring equitable livelihoods and distribution of foods. These go together, but the last one is the trade-off, mitigating climate change impacts. So balancing these trade-offs is the essence of the topic. Session focused on challenges and role of M&E and evidence in building sustainable. So it's bringing M&E to the build-up of sustainable food systems and resilient livelihoods. And finally, the session explored a framework for this and shared learnings from national and international experiences. Now we go to the takeaways from this session. Next one, please. So now the 3 points here. One, data gaps are there and those gaps need to be plugged. Second point is that M&E should bring in locally managed climate adaptive practices. M&E should understand what are these practices, replicable practices, and bring them to the fore. And the third 2 points are about 2 specific suggestions. Invest in FPOs and SDGs and bring farmers together. This is a specific suggestion that came in. And the last one is digital diaries for farmers, making data visual for farmers will help. Next one, please. The last session was on institutionalizing pathways for evaluation at the national level. And we had a very distinguished panel. Mr. Alok Misra worked with DMEO, and he's an expert in the field. And we had an expert from Sri Lanka, Mr. Asela, and we had a distinguished expert, Mr. Goldman from South Africa, and the core group member of the ECOI, Mr. Dr. Sanjay Kumar, gave his expert's view too. Next one, please. Now, the objectives of the panel is very clear. Understand the existing model of evaluation system, deliberate on the roadmap, discuss challenges and opportunities, provide recommendations on all these aspects. Next one, please. So this actually, the conclusions are summarized in 2 slides. The first slide is the experience of the lessons based on international experience, and the next slide is on learnings that India should implement. Now here, need for institutional framework, evaluation policy. This is a requirement which reverberatingly comes out. Institutionalization is a medium to long-term process. Temporary setbacks should be lived with. I mean, this is a consolation to an evaluator. You will have setbacks, but be optimistic. Institutionalization will come through. Now, government should be at the center of focus as a knowledge broker. This came in because private partners will come in, multilaterals might come in, outsourcing will happen, but government is the key. The evaluator is the key, and he remains as the center of focus as the knowledge broker. Ownership through continuous advocacy and with senior management, politicians and decision makers. This is a must for institutionalization. Institutionalize evaluation within government and civil society. Should be sensitized that evaluation is not a fault finding exercise. This is a lesson that should come through deliberate efforts of the evaluator, that one is not on a fault finding machine.
its evaluation should be conceived as a public good. National evaluation plans and rapid evaluation studies will smoothen. Now, the short term to long term. Having said that, institutionalization is a long term process. The short term and long term survival will depend on annual evaluation plan and rapid evaluation studies. Then the last one is facilitate the evaluation plans of some national governments. This is the coherence within the evaluation system. So the central government's evaluation organization facilitates the state governments. Now, this is the last slide. This is the consolidated learning which has come out of it. Make use of all existing sources. Triangulation is important. Not that at the outset I conceive a survey and go into the field. Make use of all the available data, unit level data, big data, administrative data, and triangulate them and see if there is an evidence gap. Then address the evidence gap through surveys. Then there is a crisp mutually reinforcing framework, which is create a virtuous cycle of demand and supply by working towards national evaluation framework, erasing deficit in understanding about evaluation at all levels of bureaucracy and at all relevant institutions. Relevant institutions cut across all public institutions and other stakeholders, and designing courses and curriculums and standardizing them. This is the catching early argument. I mean, evaluation becomes, it gets inculcated to the new generation through this process, and building incentives by creating champions and acknowledging them. So this was the framework which finally evolved out of it, and this is the evaluation part of the conference in summary. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrew sir. Thank you, Shailendra sir, for a very detailed yet encapsulated summary of the entire proceedings of last 2 days in 9 sessions that provided a overview of what has happened in the last 2 days. Now, without further ado, I would request our keynote speaker, Sri Sudhanshu Pandey sir, Secretary, Department of Food and Public Distribution, Government of India, for his keynote address. Over to you, sir, for your keynote address.
Thank you very much, Avinash. First of all, let me compliment very esteemed and distinguished colleague, Dr. Shekhar Bonu. He brought not only very rich experience with him in government, but he is trying to contribute in a very unique way with something which has not been a very high priority item in earlier years. And this Office of the Development Monitoring and Evaluation Office, DMEO, I think is a beginning in right direction towards institutionalizing M&E mechanism. The 2 days that have been summarized very well by rapporteurs, and they cover almost all aspects and dimensions. But I would take this opportunity to share my field experience into what actually happens on ground and what are the challenges that we face and perhaps what needs to be done. In some ways, these aspects have been covered in 2 days, either first day focusing on monitoring or on second day focusing on evaluation. One of the biggest challenge, so I would list that in the order of priority, that we face in the field is the low priority, low recognition, low ownership given by the highest executive. Now, if the highest executive is not giving priority to this, a very important function. And you can see this. This is the second dimension. You can see this very clearly from the resource allocation and time allocation. The resources that go into making of a policy or its implementation, at the same time, adequate resources are not allocated to effective monitoring and evaluation. And often we see that this is an afterthought in most of the schemes, and this is not inbuilt into the program. Either this comes at a later date, or this comes as a completely independent intervention through an outside agency. Rapporteurs did cover one of the point here, but again, as I said, the challenge on the ground is that if the agency that comes in and looks into monitoring and evaluation as an outside body, then the data sharing, the information sharing is not adequate right from the beginning. And therefore, they unnecessarily take surveys which may not be relevant and for which actually better quality data may be available with some of the implementing agencies. And those data could be collated, could be collected, could be interpreted and used. And later, only on the gaps, they could build on surveys and field studies. So what is the problem and what is the solution? The solution we found in some of the programs that right from the beginning, when the program is conceptualized, the monitoring and evaluation should become integral part of this as an institution, but the agency that has to do this part should be reporting only to the highest management at that level. It could be at the district level, or it could be at the subnational level, state level, or it could be at the central level. Third, extremely important challenge that we face on ground is that this whole exercise is often not seen as a collaborative or an exercise towards improvement. This role is seen as an adversarial role, and this is seen as a fault-finding exercise. How this situation can be changed on ground, and we have done actually, we have felt this experience on ground, and we have addressed sometimes in a very unique way. If the agency identifies itself with the local community, who are an important stakeholder, identifies them as part of the whole process, and then interacts with them, posing right kind of questions, then they are more open to give right kind of answers. Otherwise, they feel that on one side, agency which is implementing will make them suffer more, and their interest may be adversely affected on ground. So which means if that is the situation that develops on the ground, then the stakeholders will not be forthcoming with the right answers, and they will not share the correct information. And then the process of both monitoring and evaluation will suffer in qualitative terms. We may be able to get some quantitative data, but the quality aspect may suffer. Another a very important challenge that we often see on the ground is that the role and responsibility is not very clearly assigned. As a result of which, the monitoring and evaluation agency also faces a lot of ambiguity in evaluating various outputs and outcomes on ground. The next big challenge, and it's a quite significant challenge, comes from conflicting accountabilities. We often see that a particular program has inbuilt element which some component is social, some is economic, some is also environmental. And these conflicting accountabilities have different weightages. And if the program focus is not very clear, then the monitoring and evaluation agency may also err in actually assigning right kind of weightages to various conflicting objectives of that program. And therefore, there has to be absolute clarity right at the top when this job is assigned to the monitoring and evaluation unit, that what is expected from them. Another very important challenge that we face, and it has been very aptly highlighted, is the lack of capacity. So lack of capacity is something which exists at every level. And reasons are very clear. Monitoring and evaluation is not a very glamorous function. It's a very rigorous function which requires very serious commitment, serious involvement, and very different kind of orientation. This commitment and orientation is extremely important for M&E function. And therefore, if we do not develop capacities through right instruments at every level, whether the community, whether the subnational, sub-district or national capacities, we will not be able to actually deliver results. In fact, some of the M&E function we realized as now we are working with central government various programs, that through convergence we can actually do much better monitoring and evaluation of several programs, because many features are common, objectives are also similar, beneficiaries are also same, the geographical area is also same, and therefore if this convergence is recognized and a unified M&E apparatus is created which can perform on several schemes altogether, where database is common, then the function can be performed much more efficiently. This is what we are realizing in many of the central government programs. Very recently, you must have come across that in Rajasthan, venturing on a similar kind of initiative, they have launched Janadhar. Janadhar is nothing but convergence of various welfare schemes of central government and state governments and recognizing family as a unit. Now, the database already existed, but making use of the database to perform now this particular function, the M&E will become very objective, very result oriented, and output and outcomes of various government programs can be simultaneously evaluated and commented upon in a very, very effective a manner. There was also a mention of use of right kind of tools and technology, and I very much agree with the recommendations that application of technology cannot be a substitute for very rigorous processes and methodology. Wherever then you need to use that kind of technology which you identify will perform that particular function in a more efficient way, perhaps you can use that technology for that specific application. But thinking or depending that merely introduction of technology is going to deliver good results and would make M&E more efficient is perhaps not true. And I am happy that this was the finding of the session also, which covered some of this dimension. Now, what data was one of the issue on which a lot of discussion seems to have happened. And as I said, that data is actually, unless it is primary data, and there are various programs where primary data is getting captured, then that data can be made use of by several other programs where the beneficiary or the geographical area is same. But unfortunately, often it happens that for a different program in the same geography with same set of beneficiary, another agency tries to capture the data afresh or uses some secondary sources of data. Now, perhaps that can be avoided. As I said, if the data is being collected, then the use of that data, and it's a big challenge in government because the silos unfortunately are so strong that sharing of data even within the department among different divisions is a challenge. And this requires a very continuous coordinating role and messaging by the chief executive or head of that department. And only gradually I have seen that if message from your side is very clear that this data belongs to everyone and it should be shared freely and should be used freely by everybody, it will not happen. Similar messaging is required at the state level. And this problem has to be recognized upfront that this is a challenge. This is a problem. Technology is now helping. The DGQI initiative, which is another initiative that the NITI has launched, at least we are finding that that is becoming very handy because wherever secondary data was being captured or it was not on real-time basis, we are insisting that data flow becomes seamless right from its generation and capturing to its further use or analysis. But this is a challenge and answers have to be found both institutionally as well as structurally within the department. This commitment and priority is very, very important from all of us who are in policy making position. At the end, I would like to compliment that the 2 days were structured very well in 9 sessions, covering 6 very important themes. which are very relevant to M&E, and the eminent speakers, the rich experience that they brought with them, the panels, they have, as you yourself recognized, have given you ample work for the next 1 year, and hands are going to be full doing this. But as I said, this is something which needs to be conveyed continuously to various ministries, departments, state governments, and especially the political executive, that a good M&E can actually not only save a lot of expenditure, but can deliver the objectives in a much better way, and will therefore serve the political objective better, because ultimately political executive is interested in fulfilling the objective with which a particular developmental scheme or program is brought in. And if we can convince right in the beginning that the adequate resource allocation to this aspect of the program or scheme is equally important to deliver the desired objective, he is going to see the benefit and prioritize and emphasize that this is also his priority, and therefore all programs should have inbuilt mechanism to have M&E component in their schemes and programs. So I would like to once again thank my very dear friend and colleague who joined service with us, but moved on, gathered a lot of rich experience globally, and has come back to government to give it back that rich experience in enriching the governance in the best possible way. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Sudhanshu sir. Thank you very much for your enriched and valuable anecdotal experience from the ground level, which you bring in, and the importance of M&E functions, and your suggestions to overcome these challenges which is faced at the ground level. Without further ado, I would hand over the floor to Dr. Shekhar Bonu sir for vote of thanks.
Thank you, Abhinash. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. At the outset, I have to thank Secretary Sudhanshu Pandey for his very insightful and inspiring keynote address. In the audience, there are a lot of my young staff for whom a lot of your key messages are so critical. So clearly, as you have said, evaluation is not a priority, it's not glamorous, it's rigorous, yet it's extremely critical. And it has to get its due place, and you have also indicated some ways to do it. And also, so at the political level, you have guided us to communicate more, to let the political executive also know that monitoring and evaluation is so important for their own larger purposes. They run on a very, very short cycle of 5 years. They have to get elected next time. So monitoring evaluation truly plays an important role. And we get that message very, very clearly. You have also highlighted how technology has its own limitations, but yet through systematic ways we can make sure that the technology can overlay our
rigorous processes that have been set up to achieve greater efficiencies and transparency. And you also highlighted the importance of data interoperability in terms of breaking silos and also sharing and using the right technology to achieve results. And it's indirectly you you also directly you have highlighted the importance of family registry, which Rajasthan has been practicing, like Janadhar. Here I would like to bring out my own experience. Around 1.5 year, 3 years back, when I joined, we thought social registry was important, which is nothing but family registry, and India already had building blocks like Aadhaar, and we were trying to push this concept. But later on I realized Karnataka state, Haryana, Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh were way ahead. They already executed it. And in case of Karnataka, I mean, some elements are global class. The way it has been thought through, single source of truth, the way privacy has been, data privacy has also been managed. So this just tells us that India is a nation where amazing stories are happening all across. Within the ministries also, we realize some ministries are in some areas global class, without any doubt. And some are slightly lagging behind. So one key lesson is that also had come through. Government has to be a knowledge intermediary. Niti Aayog and DMEO as the apex organization, we really need to be humble. There's so much of knowledge around in our ministries, departments, in our states, in our communities, in our larger ecosystem, that is the academia, private sector, civil society. I think we are all working for a common purpose of building a better future for this nation and for its most marginalized. So I think the partnership, mutual trust, respect, and building on the strengths of the larger ecosystem, whether it is state governments. So I think we really need to work very hard. I think this is the key, one of the key messages that has come through. Partnerships, government working on external strengths of external ecosystem, breaking silos, and focusing all our energies on our common shared aspirations and goals. So in this context, there is a lot more we need to do. But another key message that had come, initially we were working to build capabilities or at the national level. We have slowly moved to state level, working with various states on building the evaluation institutional capabilities. But the message that has come through this two-day conference clearly is, what about the communities? What about the people for whom all these schemes are? They have to be at the center stage. They have to. So monitoring and evaluation, I think, has to be participatory. It has to be empowering to the communities. And why should the data be only collected upwards and someone sitting in state or center doing analysis? Data should be shared at every level. It should help. It should be a powerful tool for empowering communities. Likewise, another message has very clearly come. Monitoring or evaluation by third party is not a fault finding or an audit. I think the whole system is trying to achieve the broader objectives, but in extremely challenging constraints. The ministries and departments, they have huge constraints. Only if you go and sit on the other side, one understands the constraints. Since I have sat at least for some time on the other side, I understand. So that understanding, that humility, that partnership, and that collaborative work, I think, should be there. Evaluation and monitoring should be tool to empower all stakeholders and to build that, to make the system achieve its larger objectives. So we had a number of suggestions from this, from the keynotes speaker today and my two outstanding colleagues who have summarize the proceedings, extremely complex proceedings. From DMEO side, I would like to assure all the key stakeholders, within central government, within state governments, outside the government, academia, private sector, civil society, our multilateral partners, our think tanks, and so forth. We take all your suggestions seriously. We have been working on many of these suggestions, but we'll continue to work on it. I now coming to thanking. I really want to once again thank Secretary Sudhanshu Pandey for taking time, joining us, and for very insightful and inspiring insights. I would also like to thank both my colleagues, Shailendra and Anthony, for very clear and succinct summary. I think we have the recording. If people can't go through the 2-day workshop recordings, I think this summary can really provide a lot of insights. I would also take this opportunity to thank all the panelists, the moderators, and our partners. In fact, some of the sessions were fully handled by our partners. It was outstanding collaborative work, and that has always been the spirit. And I would also like to thank all my young colleagues here who are actually sitting in front of me. But also, would, I have worked in multiple settings, and I've been in Niti Aayog for 3 years. I think whatever we could do in DMEO, it's largely because of the organizational, truly transformational organizational structure that Niti has managed to create, where such young, outstanding lateral talent has come. Many and many of them are from private sector and other walks of life who have come here with a lot of idealism to create impact. And with little bit of guidance from senior government colleagues, I think there's a huge amount of magic that we see here. And I think this is also a critical lesson or message to rest of the government, whether it is central government or state or anywhere. I think we should create spaces for people from, I am also a lateral entrant in a way, but spaces for other outstanding professionals to come in, especially in data sciences and analyticals, all the capacity constraints that we are talking about. There's huge amount of the talent that exists outside. We need to create spaces for them. Anyway, I again want to thank you all for making sure that this whole 2-day very, very complex task of organizing this national conference with so many different participants go through very, very smoothly. I would also like to thank all our participants, somewhere from 500 to 150 odd participants who have joined, and for their active engagement and questions, and also participating and also supporting us on social media. I really want to thank you all. And I know majority of you are people who are interested in M&D, and we look forward to collaborating with you as we move and do a lot more to strengthen the monitoring and evaluation ecosystem across this country. At the end, yes, we have key messages, but I also want to take this opportunity to highlight some of our key analytical challenges. I think we are, as a M&D community, I think we are really good on evaluating schemes where the end beneficiaries are individuals. But we need to figure out better ways to evaluate infrastructure. I think that's a challenge. Government spends huge amount of money on infrastructure, and it is supposed to stimulate growth, jobs. I think that efficiencies have to be constantly evaluated and established, and that should be also guiding factor in investments in critical infrastructure. The other, ultimately, all the schemes depend upon government, its institutions, its regulators, its policy, its laws. So, means to also evaluate institutions. Some are regulatory, some are educational, some are research. And it's not necessary that they'll be evaluated outside, but some sort of solid frameworks for self-evaluation. I think these are overall across, I think there are limited capacities within the government and the tasks are humongous. So we need to, as a government, both at central level and state level, build significant capacities in technical services procurement. I think that is also something that DMEO has been working closely. We have empaneled survey firms. We are planning to empanel knowledge institutions. But I think this is also a critical step. Finally, once again, I thank everyone for making the whole two-day conference a big success. And thank once again our keynote speaker for his erudite insights. And I thank you all. And with this, and finally, thank our moderator, Avinash. And with this, I would like to call a close to this two-day national conference. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Shekhar Bonu, and wish you all a very happy Holi. Thank you.
Yes, wish you happy Holi. Thank you.